diligent in honoring your pledges made for this current year. The stewardship campaign for 2026 will run from today through November 9th. I had sent out pledge letters. Hopefully everyone has received their pledge letter, and I will be sending some follow-up letters as well. Father's already mentioned that we have 2 visiting bishops next Sunday and Sunday the 9th to help celebrate our stewardship campaign. If you have any questions or concerns, of course, give me a call and/or Father Thomas. Today's stewardship focus is talking about time. Time is what you can give to the church. It's also what talents you might possess that you could dedicate, provide to the church for the benefit of the church. Everyone in this room, everyone in this church has some type of talent. No matter what it is, big or small, find something of yourself to dedicate your talent and time to the church. In addition, spiritual discipline, as Father Thomas talked about in his sermon, that means a persistent commitment to the church, not just financially, but in your attendance. Also, any talent you possess that you can give to this church. And more importantly, persistent commitment to representing St. Andrews in this community. Now I want to introduce Vaughn Cunningham. He's going to do his testimony this morning. 104. We appreciate you.
Vaughn, thank you. I guess you can hear me good. You can stay here. No, I won't stay here. You should move the camera. People are all back here and I'm I want to start off with a little parable. You see, one of my favorite breakfasts, especially when we travel anywhere and go through the airport, I always like to get a McDonald's biscuit, bacon, and egg, cheese biscuit. And I've always liked it. I wanted to tell you a little bit about it before I start to tell more about myself. Once there was a farmer who decided that he wanted to make one of the best breakfast biscuits you could ever make. And so he donated his flour to make the biscuits. But he began to think about it, and he realized that the biscuits were just part of it. And so he went out to the cow, and he asked the cow for some milk to make cheese to put on this biscuit. And the cow said, "Sure, I'll do that." Well, that was part of it. And then he thought, "Oh, wait a minute, we need a little more." So he went to the chicken, or the hen, and said, "We need some eggs to put on this. Would you like to do that?" And the hen said, "Sure, I'll get involved." Well, then he thought, what would really make it great is if we had some bacon. And so he went to the pig, and the pig thought about it a little bit, and he said, "Sure, I think I can do that." Well, look at the moral of the story is this. There was a farmer who was involved in making that breakfast. There was a cow who was involved in making that breakfast. There was a hen that was involved in making that breakfast. But there was a pig that was committed to making that breakfast. Are we just involved in the church, or are we committed? Are we just involved with our faith, or are we committed to God? It was Lent, 1962, Thursday morning. It's Thursday, March the 22nd, 1962. And I happened to be a senior in high school at that time. And one of my jobs that morning was to go to the church hall and set up for a youth meeting at 6 o'clock in the morning. Because we, as a youth group, had decided that to give up the win, we would give up time before school to have a service. So as I was sitting there and had the hall set up, I began to think about, where am I going in my life? What am I going to do with my life? I'm graduating from high school. Unfortunately, I'm not athletic enough to get a scholarship. And I certainly wasn't the sharpest quail in the box. And so I began thinking about, what am I going to do with my life? And I actually sat there and began to pray all alone in a dark hall. And I asked God, what do you want me to do? And before anybody had shown up, all alone, I heard only two words. And I heard them very softly said, just wait. Just wait. Just wait. And that was it. And so my life went on, and I spent 4 years trying to get into a degree, and it didn't work. And I had several odd jobs, and finally one day I was told by a friend that my draft number was up, and that I was going to be drafted. And so I said, the Army's not getting the better of me. They're not going to be able to draft me. I'm just going to go down and join. I knew, being a young man from Phoenix, Arizona, in the middle of the Vietnam conflict, that I would probably get sent to Vietnam. But after basic training and after my schooling, for some odd reason, I was sent to Germany. I don't know why. Why would I go to Germany? And I spent my time in Germany, and I actually had a wonderful time over there. And I never went back. 3 years later, after my service was done, I went back to Phoenix. And coming out of the Army at that time, I couldn't find a job. I worked at a gas station. I worked fast food. And finally, my father had a bus depot in a little tiny town called Las Cruces, New Mexico, just north of El Paso, Texas. And he said, why don't you come down here and you can work for me part-time and see if there's something down here you can do. And so I thought, well, I'm going to leave the home I grew up in. I'm going to leave off a lot of friends. But maybe I could find a job there. So I went down and started working at a bus depot. And at the same time, started a little delivery service and freight forwarding service there in Las Cruces. And my first job was to take my father's bank deposit to the bank every morning. Well, Judy was a training teller at that bank, and I could not see her name because she was standing behind training. And I kept looking and looking until finally I got the name. Well, a couple of weeks later, and I always think this was interesting as well. A couple of weeks later, a package came into the bus depot that was addressed to Judy. And so I thought, this is a good way to meet her. And so I took the package with my little delivery service, and I went out to her house, weeks before Easter. Easter. Think about the dates now. And she came to the bus depot with a basket with Easter eggs in it. And that was how we started dating and eventually got married. I give you the date, but it's too close. It was actually November 15, 1975. So Judy and I were married, and lo and behold, the United States government decided that the Interstate Commerce Commission would open up all state lines, and so my little fight for it went under. And then Judy and I got together, and I said, you know, I always wanted to go back and finish college. And so at the ripe old age of 40, I became one of the oldest students at New Mexico State University. And through the help of family and friends and church, I was able to graduate. And as I got out, I got a job at a savings and loan company. Well, I worked at the savings and loan for 2 years, and it was at the wrong time at the wrong place, because at that time, anybody old enough to remember know that all the savings and loans went under. So we thought, well, what are we going to do? But a moment later, the job opened up at the university in New Mexico. And so I took the job at the university and worked there for several years. And I figured I was pretty stable in the university. They never laid anybody off. Well, I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, one more time. And they started laying people off. And so I immediately started looking for another job, because I'm sure I was one that was gone. And I happened to get a call from a person who said they were from Arlington. And I thought, Arlington? I've always wanted to work in D.C. And then they informed me it was Arlington, Texas. Now keep in mind, Judy's a native New Mexican. And so when I went in and I said, what do you think about this job in Texas? Her first reaction was, you know, those Texans always came over to New Mexico and took up all the darn parking places. We just hated them. But I convinced her that we should go there. And so we moved down to Arlington, Texas. And I went to work for a hospital group, Harris Methodist Hospital, and they were building an insurance company. Well, once again, they decided that insurance companies and hospitals don't mix. And so they shut us down. And I'm back again without a job. All of a sudden, somebody called me up, and they said, Vaughn, put in your application at John Peter Smith Hospital. And so I went over to John Peter Smith Hospital, and they happened to have a little insurance company, but the insurance company took care of the uninsured and underinsured population over in Tarrant County. And I thought, you know, this could work well. Because now, not only do I have a wonderful job with low money coming in, but I also have the ability to help people within the community. Well, about 2.5 years ago, I retired from John Peter Smith Hospital. Why I'm telling you all this? His father called me the other night and said, Vaughn, would you come down and take the testimony? And so I want to give it to you. When Father called me, he said, just say something from your heart. And I thought, well, what do I say? And I said, you know, what I want to really tell you people is the blessings I have. And so I took a piece of paper, and I challenge all of you to do this. Take a piece of paper, and down one side of it, begin to write all of the hardships, the disappointments, the suffering that we've had in life, and across from it, put another column out there and mention all the blessings you've had in life. And what I found out was every blessing matched up to one of the hardships. Every single one of them. So what I thought was a disaster turned out to really be a blessing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, this time of year, we start to talk about money and that type of thing. And I think what we really need to talk about is blessings. You know, God has done so much for me in my life. And I have so many experiences, I could probably take up the rest of the hour plus. But I just wanted to say, this is important to understand what we are doing this time of year. We are being asked to give up time, talent, and treasure. And we all understand treasure. And I think we've all heard about tithing. And tithing says we should give 10% to the church. And that's probably a fair figure. But what about time? Do you realize there's 24 hours in a day? 10%, 2.4. 2.4. I was taught a long time ago to get up in the morning and pray and to read. An hour? That's not asking much first thing in the morning. To help with the church, a couple hours. God gives us 24 hours in every day. Free. No strings attached. Talent. Talent's a funny thing. We all can do different things. But you know, once again, we're looking at the same thing. How much talent? 10%? Is that asking too much? I don't think so. I have no talent of my own. I only have the talent God has granted me. What's giving 10% back to God? We just did something, sang a hymn a minute ago. I've done it for many years. And it was called Ancient Words. We have been commanded. You and I have been commanded. In Paul's letter today to Timothy, to go out and evangelize, to impart the ancient words to the world around us, to our children, to our children's children. Judy and I have 16 grandchildren. We've got 3 great-grandsons. I'm proud to announce one is 2 months old, which I'm very happy with, because he doesn't do much but cry and poop. I have one great-grandson who is 8 years old, and I have one great-grandson who stands about 6'2", 6'3", maybe a little taller than that. He's 18 years old, and is already looking at playing basketball for one of the colleges over in New Mexico. What about the ancient words to them? Aren't we responsible for that? Shouldn't we be doing that to the kids, to the children around us? Father mentioned the children's voices back here, and I love to hear that. I'd like to hear more. I'd almost like to drag them all off the street just to have a chorus of them back there. Anyway, 10%. Time, talent, and treasure. But remember, you can be involved like the farmer. You can be involved like the human. You can be involved like But are you dedicated? God bless you and thank you.